the podcast to fill my brain. Movies and Task, Reddit, Minute of Sports, betting $1 and Joel the Game, Quora and questions from real listeners, all that and more on Joel the Podcast. Bzzz. Hello everybody, I'm Alex.
And I'm Alex.
And this is our podcast, Joel. Welcome to episode 123, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. What a great number.
123, episode 123 of Joel the Podcast. We're excited to have you here today. And I thought I'd just begin by letting everyone know that Nathan does not owe me $1.
Right. Alex also does not owe me $1.
Well done. Should we move on to the Sports Minute? Or am I going too quickly?
Yes. Whoa, hold on there.
We're not getting derailed enough. No, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go right to the Sports Minute. Wait, somebody complained about me using my phone for the Sports Minute, right? You should use your phone.
Oh, I'll use my phone for the Sports Minute again. Well, this is good. We'll be slowed down because I'm less practiced at getting my timer pulled up here.
One of the many skills that I've developed as this podcast has gone on is pulling up a 1-minute timer.
Yeah, I've actually got it from the last time, so I'm ready when you are.
All right, start whenever you're ready.
Begin.
Well, the NFL is in full swing, and the Eagles are good, so that's cool.
Yeah.
College football is in full swing, and Purdue's terrible, so that's cool.
It's fine.
Did you watch any of the Ohio State game at all?
I have not watched any Purdue football, and I feel fine about that.
And that, as you should. I watched the first okay, this will be fist. I watched the first 10 minutes of the Ohio State game, and in the first drive, Purdue got stopped. In Ohio State's first drive, they stopped Ohio State. Then
Whoa.
in Purdue's drive, they drove all the way down the field and fumbled it or something. Or no, kicked a chip shot field goal from the 3-yard line and missed it. And then Ohio State drove down and then Ohio State got the ball No, I'm telling a terrible story. Anyway, there was
that's the end of the Sports Minute.
There was a brief
anyway,
moment where they had a shot to win, and then they got destroyed. All right, that's the end of the story.
Great, great story, great minute.
Terrible story, terrible minute. This is why we limit it to 1 minute. All right,
Good
Sports
job.
Minute over.
Sports Minute over.
And I think that brings us to one of the most important moments in the history of our podcast. Sort of,
Yes.
not really.
Actually, yeah, probably next time.
Yeah. So, as listeners may remember, last time we received an email from a new listener, who I do not remember their name. I don't know if you remember their name.
No, but we'll find out shortly.
Yes. And we of course responded to the email on air. And so kind of this would be a big moment to see did they send us another email? Did they listen to our response? However, we have not posted the last episode.
Let me just stop you right there so I can give the full context of this one.
Okay,
I
great.
have done all of the work expected of me, and YouTube.com, the website, has inexplicably failed to upload this video. I have been desperately trying for the past month, nonstop, as hard as I can, using every bit of effort available to me, and simply for technical reasons beyond my control, not only has YouTube failed to upload the video, it has actually gone onto my computer and deleted all the completed files. I'm just now actually discovering this tragedy and starting to compile the episode into its completed form, and really hopeful that I'll be able to get it up there sometime before the next episode we record. Maybe we'll see.
So if you had been constantly trying to upload it, how did you just now discover that it hasn't been working?
Well, so at first I thought it was just going really slow. You know how sometimes when you try and do something that usually takes like 2 or 3 minutes, it actually takes a month?
I can't say I relate, but go on.
Yeah, so I mean, I find that happening constantly. Like for example, here another thing that I've been trying to do for the past month um, is actually like put my keys in my pocket. So
Right.
like usually I just grab my keys as I leave in the morning, put
Uh-huh.
them in my pocket and go to work. Actually, since October 26th, so I guess it's been a little bit less than a month, more like 2 or 3 weeks. I've been constantly just in the process of putting my keys in my pocket since the
Uh-huh.
26th of October. And I really can't explain it. I have no explanation for this other than to blame Google for that as well.
This seems like a quantum physics thing.
It very well may be. I think some of our listeners are at least as qualified as we are, which is, very impressive, first of all, to explain that. So if
Sure.
if you want to, propose a solution, I've
Or
been
even an
trying,
explanation. Even
or an
like if you
explanation
know,
even,
yeah,
yeah.
if you know why. Let me ask you this: are you actively right now still trying to put your keys in your pocket?
Yeah, I am. I'm moving very slowly my hand toward my pocket. It actually turns out that my keys are on the counter though. So I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
probably have to start this whole maneuver over now that I've
And
realized that.
obviously, I assume you've used your keys during the past 2 or 3 weeks while you've been trying to do this, right?
Sure, they just haven't made it into my pocket.
Does it interfere with the process of trying to put it in your pocket when you have to use them?
No, it seems like I can do any motion with them. I don't have them right now, but I can do any motion with them
And the listeners
except
can't
put
see
them
you.
in
He's
this
like making
famously
motions with his
visual
hand for
medium
what he can do with the keys.
where I'm moving around and demonstrating in that way. Yeah, so it's really inexplicable.
All
Is
right.
the only
Well,
the only
if you're
word.
listening and you might have you think it is explicable and you know the explanation
Please
of
explic it to us.
yes, please send us the explication um, of why this is happening to Nathan.
Yeah.
Because we would love to know, and if you have a solution, or maybe you know that there is no solution, just whatever the case may be.
Yep.
This is interesting, and maybe this sounds like I've never heard of this before,
Mhm.
so this might be like a scientific novelty that could be like published if somebody wanted to study it.
Yeah, I'd be willing to be, second author on that paper for sure. If you're willing to whip it up, Alex being the first, of course. But
Right. I would be the second author, but every time I try to type my name, for some reason it takes a month.
yeah, it's bizarre. I really I have no explanation. Hopefully, if we can solve the keys thing, we'll be able to sort out the video upload.
Yeah. So long story short, though, um, we're really short story long, I guess I should say. Um, the
You can see
previous
how these
episode,
things just start to take a month.
yeah, the previous episode has not been uploaded, so it's unlikely that the person who emailed us listened to it and responded.
Right.
Um, now, let me
However,
ask you
there's
that.
there's always the chance that they've become a passionate fan and have emailed us multiple times
Yeah.
for other reasons.
So actually, I had something to say, but why don't we first get to the opening of the email
Yeah.
account
All right.
and
I'm
see
gonna-
if there's anything new in there from that person or anyone else, but
All right.
I'm most interested in that person.
We have no new emails.
Okay, well, that's predictable.
Right.
Okay, so now, let me ask you this. I would say that when the person, like when we do post the new episode,
Yeah.
the person is likely not going to listen to it.
Right.
Especially considering how long it's been since they sent the email.
Yes, it has been almost exactly to the day 3 months.
Okay, so given that fact, do you think we should consider replying to the email?
That would be almost unprecedented. Have we ever sent?
It
We
would.
have sent an email on
We
this.
have sent email. We've sent emails. Obviously, normally we want to respond on the air, and part of me definitely wants to stand on principle here and not respond via email, but to respond via our public platform.
And the other part
how-
is just so curious, right?
Right. The other
Like we
part
have
of
an
me
opportunity here.
actually wants to find out the information and wants to improve our odds of finding out the information by replying to the email.
Right.
So what's your thought on that?
What would you think? How would you consider? Wow, we haven't sent an email from this account since 2021. What would you think of when we post the episode, replying to this email saying, "Hey, we just dropped a new episode. We discussed your email. It's in the beginning. You can give it a listen and let us know what you think." Instead of actually directly answering any question here. That way
That is a great idea.
we might get a view, but the risk is they just might ignore that, not do it.
What if we did that, but we also said, like, also, we're super curious to hear about, like, your experience of our podcast, so send us another email. Or, like, something to that effect.
Sure.
So, like, here's the episode. You can hear the answers to your questions here. Also, like, tell us about how you heard about our podcast and what your experience of it is. Something like that.
Ask the questions again, basically, and simplify it.
I would just ask one question. Like, the more complicated it gets, like, the less likely this person... And by the way, what is the person's name?
Raphael.
Yeah, the less likely Raphael is to respond. So,
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like that's a plan.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
So we will do that, and hopefully next episode we will have something to report on this.
Yes, let's hope.
All right. So we've no emails. So I guess we'll move on off of this portion and into the main episode, unless there's anything I'm forgetting.
If you're forgetting it, then I'm forgetting it. So let's go. Full
All right.
speed ahead.
So I will turn it back over to you to explain what we're going to be doing today.
All right. I am going to give the same explanation, hopefully in abbreviated form, that I gave you and Shelby before the episode when we were discussing this. So,
And you're not going to include the inflatable reindeer, right?
I'm not including the inflatable reindeer. I'm not going to talk through DNS. We'll probably skip the cookie bit. I'm just going to try and stick to the idea, the like core idea.
This sounds ambitious, but okay, good luck.
you can email us for details about all the rest of that stuff. And I don't think we said before where they can email us, did we?
No. Well, if you're not sure where to find our email, it's on our website, which is www.alexandalex@joelthepodcast.github.io/alexandalex@joelthepodcast.website/index.html. So just head over there and click on something, and that should take you to our email. Or apparently you can look at our video description, which is much less interesting.
I wonder if that's how people do it.
Is the email directly in our description?
It used to be, but I think I've changed it now. I think the recent episodes, it should be the website.
Because I would assume that's actually how Raphael discovered, unless he was the person who listened to the new person who listened to the episode recently.
Could have been, because the email came only like a week or so after 120 that had all of those new person views.
Okay, and let me say this too. If anybody is... So we just discovered by looking at analytics that we had one person, new viewer, watch and listen to the entirety of episode 120.
Yeah.
If that is you, and you're not Raphael, like you're a different person, send us an email, because we would love to know just so much information.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're still listening to this. I feel like this is one of the areas where posting once a month maybe is to our disadvantage.
I mean, we could discuss the episode frequency. It may be a bit much to get back on the once a week editing an episode, but hey, if the quality goes down, the frequency can go up.
Okay, anyway, so send us an email, go to our website, all the things. All right,
Yeah.
so now go ahead
Here's
and,
the idea.
and launch into the idea.
Here's the preamble to the idea. I started recently listening to the podcast Lateral by Tom Scott, who, as some viewers may know, had formerly released a bunch of YouTube content about, various short topics and interesting things. And I was thinking, like, you know what? I haven't had a whole lot of Tom Scott content recently since he stopped posting. I'm going to check out this podcast. And it turns out that the podcast is essentially like a kind of a quiz between Tom and a handful of guests each week or each episode. I don't know if it's weekly, whatever it is. And the idea is they ask these questions that kind of require lateral thinking with the clues in the question itself to reach the conclusion, which is the answer. And these are all like real facts and things. And so it's kind of interesting, I think, to listen to. It's kind of fun to think along with the guessers. It's also kind of funny when you know what the answer is right away for some reason, and just they're fumbling around for a few minutes. And this all got me thinking. We ourselves have a podcast, and we do have a game that we play in the podcast, but it's kind of a bunch of different little bits and kind of almost completely unrelated mini games within this whole thing. What if we constructed some kind of game to perform as, it could be in the same kind of genre, it could be some totally different kind of game show that we could create and put out there in the future. The only thing is, I only had this idea like earlier today when I was thinking about how we were probably going to do a podcast today. So I have no details about that. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to do for this episode, to live on the air like we created Joel the Game, try and create Joel the Game show.
Ooh,
nice. Work in progress on that title there, but I don't know.
Sure, that's pretty good. Pretty good for a working title.
Yeah.
Okay, now I probably should have asked you this before now.
Yeah.
Would it be possible for you to pull up an example of what they did on the Tom Scott podcast quickly, or would that take some time and we should just forego it and you should give us like just an example off the top of your head?
Oh, like for me to play on the podcast here to give our listeners an example, or for you?
Both. Like just an example of what kind of question and clues you're talking about.
Oh, sure. Okay. So on the episode that I was listening to today, for example, and this might actually be something that you know. If not, we could kind of demo what it's like. One of the guests asked the question, in college basketball, players will have a limited subset of numbers that they can have on their jersey. Their options are 0, 00, 1 through 5, 10 through 15, 20 through 25, etc., up to 50 through 55. No other numbers are allowed on college basketball jerseys. Why? And so that's kind of the open-ended nature of the question, and you have to think about, like, what about... I guess I'll just let you go. Do you know the answer to this?
Yes, I do know. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I know the answer, yeah.
So the idea is you have to think about, like, what about the numbers like 0, 00, all those other numbers, like, what's special about those? What about the game of basketball and the people involved in a game of basketball would restrict you to using just those numbers? And eventually, after a few minutes of discussion, the guests who actually weren't all that familiar with the game of basketball at all came to the conclusion that the answer is
that when a foul is called, the referee has to indicate who it's on by holding up his fingers. So he can't do that if the numbers on the jersey are higher than the number of fingers he has on one hand.
Exactly. So that's kind of an example question and like the process that they work through.
So like what kind of so I assume do they give additional clues if they're struggling, or it's just a discussion and they eventually get there or don't?
Yeah, so there are a couple of clues, but a lot of the times what they'll do is like as the discussion progresses, they'll get kind of close. They'll say something like, the numbers, 0 through 5, maybe like it's really loud on a basketball court and like you can like shout numbers 0 through 5 easier and clearer than like 6 through 10 or something like that. And the question asker will say like, that's not really correct, but there's kind of something about that that's correct. You're like moving almost a little bit in the right direction there versus, they'll talk about like, where was basketball invented? Do the people who make basketball jerseys only print zeros, ones, twos, threes, fours, fives? And they're like incapable. And the answer will be like, no, you're not really on the right track there. But there will be clues sometimes if it's like super not clear. Like I think at one point in this question, the asker said something along the lines of like, why, like who would benefit from only using those numbers? Like
obviously the 1 through 5 mafia would.
Yeah, and that was brought up, of course. But that kind of, guides you toward thinking in the right ways. So that's the idea.
Okay, now before I go on about the game,
yeah,
here's an interesting note is that I think in the NBA they allow the numbers 6 through 9 because those numbers can be represented by 2 hands of fingers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, just an interesting note.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I was questioning actually when listening to this if this is still true in college basketball or not. I'm not 100% certain there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so regardless, all right. So I think I understand what they do on the other podcast.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say that definitely we would want to modify this. Obviously, I guess this is what we're here to do.
Yep.
My first thought on the weakness of it is that we don't have people to discuss with, really. And
yes.
Even if we do sometimes get like a guest or something like that, presumably we'll want to be able to do this game when it's just the two of us.
That would be nice, yeah.
So that's definitely a big disadvantage. The other thing is, it seems like it would be difficult to come up with a lot of questions like this.
Yeah, I think they actually have, like, as part of the production crew, some, like, question writers. And, like, they'll have, obviously, since they have a big audience, they'll have listeners send in questions.
Right, so it seems like a non-trivial amount of effort to, come up with these questions.
I agree.
So, my thought, based on those two things, is we would want to make it less open-ended in some way. Like, we would want there to be, my thought is the clue giver has a specific set of clues to give, instead of just kind of like, oh, you're on the right track or you're not on the right track.
Do you mean a certain set of clues to give as in like our Guess the Movie game where there's like specific types of facts? Or do you just mean like as you come up with a question, you must also come up with like 4 clues that increasingly guide the person more toward the correct answer? Kind of like those like bar trivia games on the TVs where it'll like ask the question and then like give facts that eliminate some of the answers and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more like that than the first one. And actually, it reminds me of a game that my family has called Smartass. Have you ever heard of that game?
No.
So basically, you get a card, and there's like 3 categories: person, place, or thing. And then you basically just read a series of facts about the person, place, or thing.
Okay.
And everyone else like you said, it gets more and more specific, and everyone else has to guess who or what the thing or place is or the person. But you only get one guess. So if you guess and get it wrong, you're out for that card.
Oh,
But you want to guess before the other people, right? Because so it's like a balance of like, okay, kind of you usually want to guess before you know for sure what the thing or person is.
yeah.
Because otherwise someone else will guess. But you know, obviously don't want to guess too early because then you're not going to have enough information. So that's kind of what it reminded me of like the types of when you were just talking.
So that makes me think, and this is a little bit at the risk of just ruining the entire concept for our episode here, but should we, instead of trying to like create a game, should we try and find something that is something that we could do that's like pre-built with the sorts of like questions or some kind of like game that we could just, buy that's intended for two people to play, but that works over audio? And
That's a potential idea, but I would say let's see if we can make a game first.
sure.
And because I would we've got a whole podcast to come up with ideas here. So I would say right now I'm just kind of thinking about the basics of the game, but presumably we should add things that make it more interesting, that are more unique to us or our podcast or our style kind of idea.
Right.
All right. So I guess I'm thinking we should narrow down what types of things would be guessed. I think it should be less open-ended than the other podcast where it's just like, here's a thing that happens and let's talk about why. We will probably want to narrow it down or have a question that's narrower than that, or not a question, a type of question that's narrower than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And actually this is a little bit of a tangent on that, but one of the things that I wouldn't say it's a bad thing about the other podcast, because it is still interesting and kind of fun to listen to how other people are thinking, but like the basketball question, for example, I also knew the answer to that. So like right away, I know where they're supposed to be going, yet it takes them, maybe 5 or 6 minutes to work through their way there. And this whole time I'm not thinking like, I'm not thinking along with them. I'm like, why can't they just see that?
Just kind of disengaging.
Yeah. So one feature that we might include, and maybe this goes along pretty well with having a more limited thing to like get to, is do we want to make it a bunch of really quick things of that theme,
We're just going to slowly whittle this down until it's Joel the Game.
Wait a minute.
Again.
What if all the things, like just doing that over and over, that's not that interesting. What if we do a bunch of different things?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so like a quicker thing is an idea.
Yeah. So this is kind of like Simple Jeopardy, maybe, is how we can model this idea so far, where you're asking quick questions that have quick answers. Maybe you get it or you don't, with your one guess, if we choose to keep that rule. Are there other... Is there other inspiration? Do we want to draw from other areas?
Well, so I would say we want to make it a little bit more extended than that. Like maybe the question's narrower, but I think it sounds like we want to keep the idea of you'll get multiple clues or something that will help you get it. So I listen to a podcast occasionally for Brandon Sanderson's books, and they'll do, at the end of every episode, they do a game called Who's That Cosmere Character? Because the shared universe is so big, it's like non-trivial to be like to give a series of clues, like, exactly like we're talking about. So they'll have like a clue, and then everyone will make a guess, and like first clue you generally have no idea.
Right.
And then they'll give another clue, and then everyone will guess, and another clue, and there's like 5 clues
Okay.
that get more specific. So I'm thinking something like that, where you ask that format at least, where you ask a question, the person thinks it through and guesses, and then you give it another clue, and then they narrow it down and guess again, and so they have maybe like 5 or however many guesses or clues before it's just revealed because they were dumb.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Brandon Sanderson. This isn't related to anything, but I watched like he's got a YouTube channel. I watched one Brandon Sanderson video a while ago and then just started getting flooded with recommendations. But I watched more because he's a really interesting guy to listen to, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like I think we've talked about this before, how you'll go down the YouTube rabbit holes sometimes, and then that just like is all your recommendations. And mine last month was Brandon Sanderson. So very funny that he came
I know
up.
we're on a tangent here, but what of his videos did you watch? Like, most of the videos he releases are just like weekly updates of what he's working on. I assume you didn't watch a bunch of those, right?
No, it was a video from several years ago, and it was some kind of like writing advice or something, like some kind of like, I don't even remember. I could probably like dig through the my watch history and stuff, but it was like some kind of thing not about like his fictional work, like the things that he's working on, but just like his process and experiences, which is, I think is also really, because I've read a couple books, but none of his really big like series, right? So I'm kind of like vaguely interested in getting into those sometime, but I have no context for some of the like update stuff or the guess the Cosmere character. I don't know any Cosmere characters, right?
Right. So I will recommend this to you and any listeners.
Yeah.
So he teaches at BYU. He teaches like a writing class, and he's recorded all his lectures from 2019, 2020. There's like 8 of them. And they're quite long. I mean, they're like over an hour each, I think, or maybe around an hour each. And they're just about writing. And I have no interest in being a writer.
Yeah.
But I found them generally very interesting. Just like hearing about like the process of like, how does a professional writer approach setting characters? He has like a series of what he calls like Sanderson's laws. So like kind of like rules for like writing. I ended up skipping like one of the episodes just because I was bored of it, which, do whatever you want. The last episode of it is about the business of writing.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to be a writer, like, here's how you like get into the actual industry. Here's how much like things cost. Like, I don't know, just that kind of thing was so interesting. So anyway, recommendation for you and all the listeners if you haven't seen that before and you think it would be interesting. Obviously, it's not for everyone, but yeah. All right.
watching lectures on a topic that you have no professional interest in, and the class is geared toward professional writing. It's interesting stuff.
And it's kind of funny because you can literally see the listeners can't, so rip, but my background, you can see all my Brandon Sanderson books down here on my bookshelf. So
that whole shelf of like maybe a dozen books spanning the entire shelf.
Well, only like 60% of that shelf right now is Brandon Sanderson books.
Okay.
He has a lot more books that I've read but did not buy because I read them from the library or whatever.
Sure.
But yeah, the shelf will eventually be filled up. He has another book coming out in less than a month. That's going to be his like this size, which is like super thick.
That's massive.
Yes.
That's crazy. How much?
Huh? Go ahead.
How many pages was that book that you just held up?
It's an excellent question. Pages are a little bit deceptive, but this is 1,240 pages or so.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, and every single book. So this is his like biggest epic series. Every single book he writes in this series gets longer, which is really funny. So like the 5th book, which is coming out in a couple weeks, is going to be longer than the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. like word
Uh,
count wise.
that's incredible.
Um,
It was actually in one of his videos that I was listening to. He was commenting on how like ebook pricing works, like from like on Amazon if you buy the ebook,
yeah.
and he was actually sort of complaining about how his book, which is like 1,000 pages or whatever, like hundreds of thousands of words, basically, was like
Hmm.
2 or 3 times the cost of books that have like 50,000 words. But he's like,
Right.
you get like 10 times the content for like three
Yeah.
times the price. It makes sense, but people look at this price and it's like $20 for an ebook. What?
Right. And he talks about that with Audible too, because
Yeah.
people who subscribe to Audible get 1 credit every month,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like so much more efficient to spend your credit on like one of his super long books than yeah.
His
it's like here
100
you get like
hour audiobook.
right,
versus
exactly.
the-
It's not 100. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. There's your Brandon Sanderson tangent
Yeah.
for the episode.
That was pretty off the rails. What do we?
Um,
Okay. So we're thinking of
Okay.
like given a category and some clues, you're trying to like narrow in on a top like an item or an object or something.
Yeah. So that's what I want to talk about. So we talked about the format where you get a question of some kind, you make guesses, and you get clues. Make a guess, get a clue. Make a guess, get a clue and there's a limited number of clues and guesses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that format is what we've talked about so far. So why don't we run with that for now? The next question is how to narrow down what the question is. Like, how narrow do we want to constrain it? Can the question basically be anything? Does it have to be like a factual thing? Not in terms of like it shouldn't be an opinion, obviously, but like
Right.
should it be like a hard, easy to look up like we do with the movies? Like we say, okay, the actors and
Yeah. So
Excuse
one of
me.
the
Or-
one of the things
Go
I
ahead.
found a little bit constraining about the some of the mini games, like the Guess the Movie, or in the past we've done Guess the Song, things like that, is that I don't think either of us are 100% confident a lot of the time that the other person actually knows the thing.
Mhm.
And so we in some cases are making safe picks to make sure, or at least make very high odds that the other person has heard of this thing that we're trying to guess or whatever. Is there could we somehow make the thing, the end result, just like so obvious, like pencil, as compared to whatever, some movie from 2009, so that
Yes.
there's no
So-
chance.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So, that's definitely possible. Like, because I think for the clues, I don't think we need to constrain the clues in any way.
Yeah.
That might even be an interesting part of how this goes, is you could write really interesting clues. Like, maybe your clues end up talking about, like, how the word is spelled. And it's not even related to what the thing is. So, like, there's different creative ways to write clues. So, because of that, it should be easy to just pick, like, whatever you want that the person will know.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, in that context, though, you've basically constrained the question to be, like, an item or some kind of noun, essentially.
Right.
And I'm wondering if we can expand, like, if it'd be, like, not saying we should, I'm wondering if we can expand the possible questions that can be asked from just being, like, trying to guess a noun to being broader.
Do you have an example of what you would want the like question/answer to be?
Like, this is a bad example. We shouldn't do this straight up, but like a riddle might be an example.
Okay.
Like you are asking a question that's a riddle, and they have to answer the riddle, and you give them clues that kind of may help them get closer to the answer. Would be an example.
So it does feel very similar in spirit, and I guess this is kind of the idea to the lateral podcast, where like if you're given the question and the answer, it's really obvious, right? Or at least it makes a
Right.
lot of sense. But given just the question alone, you kind of have what you need, sort of, to get going in the right direction. It just does not have a clear answer immediately, unless you happen to know the trivia fact in the case of lateral. But I don't. Maybe we
Right.
can
And
construct
it's
things in a different way.
yeah, and so I like the idea of some of the things being just an object that you guess, but I'm wondering if we can like open the floor more. And I don't, excuse me, riddle was just what popped into my head first. Like I don't really think that doing a riddle just straight up would be that interesting.
Right.
But like that's kind of just like my headspace of like a non just guess a thing question
Sure.
that we could do. But like I think like guess it like trying to figure out the basketball one that you said that would be too broad or too unconstrained of a question, in my opinion.
Yeah, the question
For
of
us
the
to
form,
do.
like, here is a series of facts, why, is kind of too much, right?
Yes. So like I'm wondering if we can define a a a set of constraints on the question or at least a vibe of constraints that we can both use. That yeah. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I like sort of, but also I can't think of an example. I think you're also having trouble coming up with an example.
All right. What I'm saying is we need to figure out what questions can and can't be asked.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really difficult to come up with a set of general like rules. So maybe we should start by saying what's allowed and what's not allowed. Like we've already talked about, you can't just ask like why something happens or like why like that's too broad.
Yeah.
And we've already said you can allow um like a you can allow just guess an item, and you can allow something like a riddle where it's like a question with a specific answer, essentially, if that makes sense.
Right.
So what other things should or should not be allowed, I guess? What are other examples of things that we would want to allow or not allow?
All right. I think it would be bad in addition to just like series of facts why. I think it's a bad thing to have like a trivia question where there's not a lot for you to
Figure out.
right? Like yeah, if we're talking about like some very specific, you know, this actor was like played the role in this movie in 2012, and that's the question, and you're just like, if you don't know about that, you can't derive any like if you've just never heard of Johnny Depp before, you can't go like, oh, that, you know, your clue is it's the Pirates of the Caribbean guy.
Right. Well, if you've never heard of Johnny Depp before, you shouldn't be. I don't know,
What do
I was
you-
trying
what
to
do
make
you-
a joke there.
What
I was
do
trying to
you
make a joke, but I couldn't think of one. Anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, I agree with that. Trivia questions should be not allowed. That's bad. Okay. I actually really like the idea of, like just interesting clues to get you to guess a normal thing.
Yeah.
That does intrigue me. All right. It sounds like we can't really think of any other types of questions. Would you say that's correct?
I don't have any. I think we'd have to like try to come up with some and probably
Right, I
start
would-
to realize what's good and what's bad.
Yeah, that might be something that we kind of figure out on the as we go.
Yeah.
Are you taking notes about this, by the way?
I kind of remembered about 2 minutes ago to start, so I have a couple of notes about good and bad
Well, we've
questions.
only taken Okay,
Yeah, no.
and can you write down the format that we said of like question followed by several clues and a guess after each clue?
Yes, that's a good thing
Okay.
to add.
All right. So,
Hey, what's up?
Hi, I'm coming to have you taste test with me.
Wow, Shelby brought me a cookie. I
Shelby heard that we haven't made a joke in like 15 minutes, and she's like, I can be near them.
Yeah, she can come back. She's not going to be disgusted by our bits.
Nathan's eating the cookie now.
No. I really hated the
Nope.
way that last sentence came out, by the way. It's interesting.
How's the cookie?
It's got a lot of the big sugar on top.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm really disappointed that the cookie's not like the size of your face.
Yeah, I did think it might be bigger.
I'm not making the giant size.
Oh, you chose to make littler ones.
I chose to make littler
They
ones.
just said that you... Is there, I'm getting like a peanut buttery kind of vibe. Am I crazy?
Yeah,
You're making a face like I'm crazy.
you're crazy. There's
Yeah.
nothing related to peanut butter in the slightest.
No?
There's maple syrup and coconut milk and cinnamon and sugar.
I do
Nothing.
agree that none of those things are peanut butter.
Yeah. I wonder if something else is coming to you like peanut butter, but it's nothing peanut-y.
Maybe I'm confused by having like a cinnamony taste in a chocolate cookie, and
Yeah.
I'm expecting it to be sweet,
Yeah.
but there's something else going on.
Mm-hmm.
And usually the something else with chocolate is
Right.
peanut butter.
Right.
If you're thinking about like a Reese's.
Mm-hmm. It's a mix of a chocolate cookie and a
Yeah.
snickerdoodle cinnamon.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to use that as a clue in one of mine. This item is not peanut butter.
That'd be a good one. Thumbs up to the cookie.
Well.
Thanks, Shelby.
Yay.
Thanks, Shelby.
Alex says
I didn't
thanks
get a
too.
cookie though.
Although he didn't get a cookie.
You gotta send him a virtual cookie.
Yeah, I'll send him the cookie reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, thank you. This
Yeah.
is the same as eating a cookie.
Are you getting it? I've clicked it a bunch of times, but I don't see it.
I did get it. No, I'm getting it.
Okay. I don't know why it's not showing me. That's weird. All right.
Okay.
All right. So we got the questions. We've got the clues that are kind of honing in on a thing.
Great.
It could be a thing,
Um,
or it could be like a riddle.
And any other things we might think of in the future, we're just going to kind of leave that as an open point.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, is there anything we can add as like a twist that would make it more interesting or fun?
All right. This is very common in game shows for there to be some kind of like money as the score, and I think that's a fun idea. And one thing that came to mind, since this is going to be like a one-on-one thing, when you were talking earlier about how you had to like gauge how quickly to like get risky with your guesses and so on, because you only had one guess, obviously that won't be the case here, but what if for each question you have like, let's call it $100, and there are, we'll say, 5 clues per question, and the 5th clue should effectively make it very obvious what the answer is. Let's say as you go along, you like bet money on each of your proposed answers out of your $100 budget. So like, if you give the first clue and I'm not feeling very confident, maybe I'll like make a guess but only bet $5 or something. And if that's right, $5 becomes like $50 or something. And then if I
Right,
get
so,
it
like,
after
each-
2, like my bet would maybe double. If I get it after 3, my bet goes up by 20%. If I get it after 4, I make my money back. If I get it after 5, I lose that money, or I don't know exactly how it would work. What would make it balanced? But what do you
Yeah,
think about
so I like
as a
that idea.
concept?
So there's a multiplier for each question that decreases as the clues come. And yeah, for clue number 1, it should be like super high, like I don't know, like 1,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
Because if we're doing this right, then you're hardly ever going to be able to get it on clue number 1.
Right.
I would say my breakdown of when you should be able to guess it, like clue number 1 should be like you're just super lucky if you guess it. Like it's like
Yeah.
guess a number between 1 and 1,000, and you just happen to guess the right number.
Right.
Clue number 2 should be like still very difficult. Maybe if you're like really, really good, you could get it on purpose at that point.
Yeah.
Clue number 3 should be like if you're good, you can get it on purpose at that point.
Right.
Clue number 4 should be like if you know the thing, you should be able to get it at that point. And the clue number 5 should be like, if you're not an idiot, you should get it at that point.
We basically just told you what the thing is now.
Right, like the smart-ass game I told you,
Yeah.
the last clue is always the initials of the person, place, or thing. So sometimes people, and sometimes you can't even get it with the initials because you just don't know it, and that one's more of a trivia game. But,
Right.
so that's kind of my opinion of the breakdown of the how difficult it should be. You should target for the clues.
Right.
Okay, and so we can come up with multipliers at a later time, like specific numbers for multipliers at a later time. We don't need to talk about that now. And I also like the idea of betting. That really goes along with the vibe of our podcast and our other game. So like betting how much... Yeah. And so would you bet before you hear the clue or after?
That's a good question. So for Joel the game, we bet after knowing what the minigame is? No, we bet before.
No, before.
Except we forget a bunch.
Yeah, but I think for Joel the game, like the whole idea of betting is more just like a randomness. Like there's not a lot of strategy to how much you bet.
Yeah.
This game, there can be more strategy to it. Like so, maybe I think it would make sense to bet after you hear the clue. And honestly, you can bet. You can even come up with your answer and then bet before as long as you bet before you find out whether your answer is correct or not. Obviously.
Yeah. So kind of like a daily double Jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
Although
Yeah.
that's before you know the question too, isn't it? So not quite like that.
There should be like a minimum bet. Because I can very easily see like no one betting anything on the first question unless they're like really far behind or something.
Yeah.
Like I can honestly very easily see people betting almost nothing until they're almost sure, actually. When I say people, obviously I'm talking about us.
Us. Yeah, I guess
I
it
can
should
see
just-
myself doing that.
It should just be so like such a good like if you win your bet on the first couple of rounds, like maybe well
Yeah, I guess we can just figure that out by adjusting the payouts because
yeah.
like if the payouts are too low, there's no motivation for you to like put your money down early. If the payouts are too high, there's no motivation for you to put your money down early because $1 will get you $1 million or whatever. So
Right.
there's got to be some balance, like sweet spot where it's like worth putting down a decent, non-trivial amount of money, but also if you think you might be able to get it, but also not. Actually, that's it. It's worth it to put down the money.
So I guess it doesn't super matter if we're both playing with the same multipliers as long as it's well designed. But one thing that I'm wondering is, should the later clues come with like a negative multiplier to incentivize you to, like if you wait for
That's an
clue
option.
4 to make your big bet, it's definitely
It's like
going to
half
be
or
negative,
something.
and
Yeah.
you're trying to
Yeah.
like save, incentivizing you to put money down earlier for the chance to actually win something, and of course
Yeah.
guess
So
first.
it sounds like you're not actually wagering your points. Like if you never get the answer, you just get 0. You don't lose money,
Yeah,
essentially. So it's not unreasonable to go from like high multipliers to have like the third or fourth question be just like 1. You just get whatever you bid, and then after that be like less than 1.
uh-huh.
Like you get less than what you actually bid. So that I think that would, and yeah, so that would make sense. Here's an interesting thought. Maybe the loser gets better odds. Like as the game goes on, if you're far behind, you get higher odds to help you catch up.
So it's like a rubber band to keep everybody in it until the last moment.
Well, you still have to get it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It just like it's never mathematically. You're not
Right.
mathematically eliminated just because you got a
Yes.
couple wrong in a row or something.
Exactly. And it's also never like helpful to run out the clock
Yeah,
as a player.
yeah.
Like those are two things we don't want to incentivize.
So yeah, if it's possible to win at any given time, given good play, it's going to be even funnier when you go on like a 20-game win streak in this one.
Right.
So-
Well, I mean, it's the same as Joel the Game. Like Joel the Game, there's no time limit usually. Sometimes we put a limit on it just because episode's too long. But as designed, there's no time limit. So if you keep winning, you can't lose other than a modifier,
Right.
which is always funny. Um, so
All right,
so it's a
here's what this game should include in some form.
Yep.
Is like spinning a wheel to adjust something. Maybe it's a modifier. Spinning a wheel is fun.
Okay. I don't think we should just do modifiers. I think that's a Joel the Game thing.
Yeah.
Okay, wheel. Maybe like... Maybe if you get it early, you earn some kind of bonus for the next question. That's... Like
That's an idea.
you can get 2 clues at once or something like... Well, that actually sounds like it would be a disadvantage.
Well,
but something like
two
that where you
clues without incurring the like multiplier penalty.
yeah, like you just shift that's kind of a basic one, like shifting
Yeah.
the odds more in your favor would be an example. But I'm trying to think of like more interesting like mechanical bonuses you could get. Like maybe you get to ask a yes or no question at some point during the one.
Yeah,
during
so
the clues.
I guess the other class of thing that we could replace this like bonus wheel with is like the lifelines in Millionaire, where you can like phone a friend or ask the audience, that kind of stuff. I think you could have your set of, especially with this being more of a one-on-one type game like that one is. You've got your set of like, as you're going through the game, you can at some point ask a yes or no question. At some point, you can
ask Chat GPT a question.
Ooh, that's a fun idea.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I wonder if...
No, but I think that these bonuses that we're talking about should be more on a wheel, like we said.
Yeah.
But maybe they should be rewarded differently than like, oh, you did well on a question, so you get a bonus. Like it should be something different than that.
So if we're talking about there being some concept of like money and betting money, maybe it costs money to do one of these things.
It costs money to spin the wheel.
Yeah. There you go. You purchase a wheel spin, which may or may not actually help you that much. But
Yeah, we could put bad things on the wheel too.
yeah.
Like the wheel, it's like I think a good ratio would be like 60% chance the wheel helps you, 30% chance it doesn't do that much,
Right.
and like 10% you like it hurts you.
I'm liking the sound of that. That I think is a fun mechanic.
And would we want to allow, like, obviously there has to be some limit on the number of wheel spins you could purchase. Or maybe not. Maybe you can purchase as many as you can afford.
Yeah, I guess you can buy a bunch of them, but if your money is your score, then even if you do really well, the cost of all those wheel spins cancels that out.
I think that we should just limit the wheel spins to 1 per like round or something like that.
I think that's a good idea.
If you want. And we should try to balance it such that it's like we don't want everyone to just always buy a wheel spin after each round. Like, that's kind of lame. We want it to be a little bit more strategic as to, well, I kind of need the help,
right,
or something like
right.
that.
I got to get this one early. I'm gonna have to risk the $50 wheel spin helping me win the $500 jackpot.
Right. Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay. So this is coming together.
We've got some real elements here now.
And one great thing about the wheel too is we can put very comical things in it.
Yeah.
Like, especially the items that don't do that much. There's some comedy that can happen there. Okay. I'm trying to think, so I like that.
Everything you say for the rest of the podcast has to be phrased in the form of a question.
You may only speak Pig Latin for the remainder of the round. Okay.
Get up and run a lap.
I mean, I would say a lap around what?
Find a track, run a lap.
I would say objectively, there's nothing missing from this game aside from numbers at this point.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's something missing from this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you feel the same way? What are we missing?
Yeah, I'm feeling like, and this is just comparison with other shows, but you've got like Final Jeopardy, you've got the little wheel on Wheel of Fortune. Surely there are some other examples of like the kind of bonus round type energy. Is that what you're thinking of, or are you looking for another like consistent mechanic throughout?
I'm not sure what I'm looking. I'm looking for something flavorful.
Yeah.
I really can't. The reason I'm asking you is because I really can't quite put my finger on what it is that I'm looking for. Maybe it's more like, maybe what's missing is like the head-to-head aspect. Like in Joel the Game,
Mm-hmm.
some of the mini games are more what we're talking about, where it's like you do a thing and I do a thing and whoever does better wins. But
Right.
some of them are like much more head-to-head, like the Wikipedia hunt. You're like going head-to-head on the same thing at the same time. I wonder if there's like an element of that we can try and include in here somehow.
Yeah, is it possible for us to come up with things in such a way that neither of us know? Like, could we both be the player in the game somehow without a third person?
If a listener sends in some questions, we could do that.
Yeah, kind of like the top 10 like soda category and top 10 fears and all that stuff.
Yes. And hopefully, like, so I wouldn't want to do this on the first time we play the game.
Yeah.
But hopefully if the listeners listen the first time we play the game and get an idea of the types of things we want to do with clues,
Mm-hmm.
that could inspire them and they could send in things for future ones.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
All
right, so when we're I think part of this is going to be outside of the podcast. You and I are both going to have to like come up with a few questions and sets of clues. So what if each one of those rounds there's an opportunity for each person to like score points in some form, right?
The person who's giving the clues, you're saying?
The giver and the receiver, I suppose. Like, it's obvious how you are earning points by answering the question correctly if you're the guesser. That's the word I was looking for. But if you're the clue giver, is there something you can do? Is there some way that we can, like...
What if the clue giver, before any clues are read, guesses what clue the person is going to get it on? Like, they can bet some of their money on what clue or maybe it's not even bet money. It's just they guess one and they get a fixed amount if they get it right on which clue the person's going to get the correct answer on.
I think that's kind of tricky because then you could construct I mean, we're talking about you and me, so we would try not to do this, but it would be possible for us to say, like, come up with 2 really difficult clues, then a third clue that really helps, and say, oh, he's probably going to get it on number 3.
That's true.
I think it'd be possible for us to, like, not do that because we don't want to wreck the game. But I just don't... That's a...
Yeah, well, no, I get what you're saying. You don't want to incentivize that, even if, you don't want to incentivize something that you don't want people to actually do.
Right. Like, yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to is, like, is it going to be fun for me to, like, try and meet that challenge knowing that I am constraining myself against the best strategy to do that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, what if it's almost like a challenge somehow? Help me flesh this out, but it's like, if I'm making the question, I say oh, you won't get it before clue 4. And so if I'm right, I get something, but if you get it before clue 4, you get something from me or something like that. That still doesn't solve the problem you just said, unfortunately, but something like that.
Yeah, it is really hard, I think, to, as the clue writers, fairly benefit from the way your clues are written. I really like that idea, though. If there was some, like, fair metric to say, like, I met the requirements for clues 1 through 3, like, we agreed afterward that they are the proper level of difficulty, and yet there was some level of thing that kept you until clue 4 from getting it, that should be rewarded. It's just, I don't know how to do that without a lot more strict rules about what our
it has to be
clues are.
something like the person who's giving the clues doesn't pick the clue number that's being gambled or bet on or competed it with somehow. Like, it has to be picked. It can't be random, though, because obviously, like, if it's 1, like, everyone's going to know you're not going to get it on the first clue.
Yeah.
If it's 5, everyone knows you're going to almost certainly going to get it by the last clue.
Yeah.
So... Yeah. Okay. So, what other things could the person giving the clues benefit from besides figuring out when the person's going to guess it? Like, what else could they benefit from?
So the clue guesser, I wonder if there's some way to incentivize betting more on earlier clues by giving, like, let's say if you bet money on clues 1 and 2 and don't get it, that money goes to the bank. But if you bet money on clue 3, 4, or 5 and don't get it, that money goes to the clue giver. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
That's a good idea.
there's benefit to betting more early because it's
Yeah,
more
1 and 2 are like
risk-free
freebies.
money. Because your later bets are riskier.
Yeah, the issue is that again. Well, I guess I was gonna say that incentivizes the clue giver to make really hard questions 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But honestly, just the fact that your opponent is guessing on these already incentivizes you to make hard clues. Um,
Is
yeah.
the idea to score based on how many clues it takes then not really that good of an idea because you're not an impartial clue writer then?
The thing is, we are mitigating that by having the clue guesser bet on which clue they're going to get it on. Like if I make it almost impossible to get until clue number 4,
I just
you
won't
can
bet
still,
any
like-
money until clue
right, you
number
just won't
4.
bet any money on 1, 2, and 3 because these clues are too, because you bet after you know the clue.
Yeah.
So you know this clue is too hard.
Okay.
So that does mitigate that a little bit. You're partially right, obviously, because the multipliers go down.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I don't have it.
it's really difficult, I think. Like clue number 1, I think it's fair if that's just a really difficult clue. That's kind of what we expect. But clues 2 and 3, I feel like you could, as you're writing them, come up with some convoluted way to justify it being worthy of clue 2 or 3, and yet it's not like that. That I think is.
I think we may be getting a little too deep into a problem that may not even end up being a problem. Because, like you said, we are going to be the ones writing these clues, or
Yeah.
listeners, and we will intentionally not try to do this.
We have incentive to make the
Um,
game not bad because otherwise we'll just make
Yes.
a bad episode and then
Right.
yeah, that's fair.
And we won't have fun if the questions are bad.
Right.
So maybe this would warrant further discussion if we find that we're not making the questions properly.
True.
So I like maybe we should implement the idea of let's assume that the person is going to write the clues fairly, but I agree that maybe the person shouldn't be betting on I shouldn't be betting on your performance. I like the idea where you said where like 1 and 2 are freebies, but 3, 4, and 5, if you bet and lose, I get the money or something along those lines.
Yeah. So let's. Do you wanna talk about like the specific mechanics, the numbers at this point, or do you think we should?
I really don't want to talk about the numbers on the podcast.
Okay. Let's leave that for offline. We'll come up with some ideas, maybe think through some, because I guess the discussion that I was planning to launch into then was like, what should the numbers be to make the game feel balanced? But that's probably us doing some math to figure out what's going on there.
Yeah. Okay, let's see where we're at recording wise. We're at, holy cow, an hour 12.
Great.
So I guess we kind of covered this. All right, so here's what I'll say. I think this game is like 95 to 100% done at this point.
Yeah.
So you and I will sleep on it. Listeners will hear this. If you have any ideas for the game that we didn't talk about, please send them to us. If you have an idea on something that we did talk about, like you think that something we said was bad or something that we dismissed was good, let us know. And I think you and I, Nathan, will have like a session sometime between now and when we record the next episode where we hash everything out, numbers wise, and then the next episode, which actually would be a Joel the Game episode, I believe, based on 5 episodes since the last Joel the Game,
Yeah.
can be Joel the Game show instead.
Whoa.
Our very first trial run. How does that sound?
That sounds pretty monumental.
Pretty monumental. I mean, if you don't tune in for that episode,
Yeah.
then you're dead inside.
You have no enjoyment in your life.
Yeah. So, all right. That's kind of it. This went better than I thought in some ways and worse in other ways. So let us know also in general what you thought of the episode as a whole. Was it really boring listening to us come up with this game? Was it interesting? So we can avoid it in the future if it was not interesting.
Yep.
But or we can do it a lot. We can come up with lots of games.
We'll come up with a bunch of games and never play them. Every episode is just
Play them.
designing a game, never playing them.
Play them one time, yeah. All right. That is it for today, I think.
Great.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Alex,
I'm Alex.
and this has been Joel.